So what about the bailout? We have to talk about
now
the bailout.
I'll talk about the bailout.
It will seem as if now that the bailout is there, there's still this talk about non-payment of salaries. And if you look at the headlines, there's some kind of subtle warning that the bailout fund must not be used for other purposes other than what it is meant for.
I can assure you the bailout is not being used for any other purposes. As at yesterday evening, government reached an agreement with workers. And just about now, I'm sure they will be signing that agreement now. And in the next 24 hours, workers of Osun will begin to, smile. 24 hours.
What's the outcome of that meeting? Because so many workers in Osun State are watching and will love to know.
The outcome is that the arrears of their salary will be paid.
You don't know the entire arrears?
I'm sure, yes. The bailout will be used for what it is, payment of arrears.
But there have been allegations by the PDP that some parts of that money have been used to, get contractors back on the road. Is it true?
That's a lie. That's a lie.
But have you seen that allegation?
From the pit of hell. I saw it. It's not true.
But they are contractors.
The bailout is intact in the bank.
But then how did we fund the contractors who are back on the road?
I don't know. Mr. Governor will have to answer that. But all I know is that the bailout is intact.
Have you seen contractors back on the road?
Not any. I've not seen any.
Do you have an idea of if the students in the tertiary institutions have been paying their fees?
Students in tertiary institutions?
Yes, have they been paying their fees?
I'm sure they must have been paying their fees. I'm sure the management of the school will have been receiving the fees.
Now, the big issue, sorry to interrupt you.
But the unfortunate thing is this, that school fees that they pay in Osun is probably the lowest in the entire federation.
Now,
and so we now need to look in the direction of charging appropriate school fees that will allow those schools to be self-sustaining.
Are these issues that you've tabled, even though quite a number of people will say, how is that going to be possible if we look at, say, the average salary in Osun State, for instance, and then perhaps people who work with the civil service and say, if we're to increase school fees, will people be able to afford what it is that will increase it to, considering the fact that we've not been able to meet financial obligations to some of our workers, and that could have an overall effect on perhaps the economy of the state?
So we must, one way or the other, strike a balance. We cannot continue to, nurture all these schools and look for funds, borrow money to sustain them. They must charge appropriate school fees. The earlier we realize that the era of free this, free that is over, the better for us as a state.
Your lawmaker, give us a bird's eye view of what exactly is going on in Osun State in terms of monies. If we have the bailout, the good news, you just dropped one good news now that I'm quite sure would delight so many people in Osun State that in the next 24 hours or so, they should be able to get something in terms of monies owed. Do you think Osun State can sustain the tempo in terms of generating revenue, in terms of payment of salaries, without an additional bailout?
Thank you. That's why exactly the governor insisted on meeting stakeholders before paying out the money. And the opposition have misconstrued it to be something else. And they're now saying all sorts of things. He has fixed the money, he has done this, he has done that. Mr. Governor said clearly that we need to sit together before we pay out this money and look at the way forward. That there will be no other opportunity, no other bailout, no other place to run to. So it is important for us, all stakeholders, to come together and look at what we're going to do. Do we agree on, using whatever we get as salary, whatever it can cover? Are we going to agree on rationalization, if that is an option?
When is this meeting going to take?
He has started since Monday. He's been meeting different stakeholders. He met with permanent secretaries, leaders of union, political opinion leaders, obas and chiefs, everywhere, stakeholders.
Is there likely to be something like a reduction of salaries?
That if you are broke, you are broke. Money will not come from heaven. No. It is what we have that we're going to use.
Would the government be looking at, do you think the government will be considering reviewing salaries across the state?
If that is the way forward, we will do that. Because if you take, for instance, 1.5 billion or 2 billion, and you have a salary scale of 3.6 billion, where are you going to get the rest?
Okay, but would the state assembly members be willing to also review their salaries in order to help?
Very well, sir. Yes, we will be willing to do that. That's a sacrifice we must all be willing to, undertake.
The revenue generation in Osun State, how what's the prospect of generating? Because the argument now would seem as if the government is not being creative to look at other ways of getting revenue to sustain Osun State.
We all agree that it is important that we generate revenue internally. Now, the other question is this: will our people be willing to pay tax? Just recently, as part of the activity to generate revenue, as part of the ingenious ways of raising funds, government said artisans should pay at least 1,500 yearly as tax. And to ensure compliance, they said before you can access any benefit from government, you must show the receipt for that tax. So if your child must go to school, you must show that receipt. If you must access any service provided by government free of charge, you must show that receipt. What did we have yesterday? People demonstrating. So look, the truth of the matter is this: we need to come together as a state, as stakeholders, and look at the way forward. Are we willing to contribute to the survival of our state?
Very quickly before we leave, what do you think is the way forward?
The way forward is aggressive internal revenue generation. We know the money from Abuja is not there again. And for us to survive, for us to meet our obligations, we must raise money.
That's on the long term. Some people say that has to be on the long term. What do you see? How do you see these teachers and workers getting paid, at least for the months that they're being owed?
Yeah, that's why the bailout is there. We use the bailout to pay them what we're owing them, and then we'll come together to fashion a way forward. Whether it's going to be half salary, whether it's going to be 1/4 salary, whatever the money that is coming into the purse of government now is able to sustain. We all agree on the way forward on that.
Honorable Oladoyin-Bamisayemi, Folorunsho, Chief Whip, Osun State House of Assembly, thank you for coming on Salaries this morning.
My pleasure, sir.